The battlefield was silent except for the hum of distant flyers. Among the rubble and crystal shards, Sergeant Jake Morrison spotted movement. A small four-armed figure bleeding purple onto the scorched earth. His orders were clear: leave no enemy behind. But this wasn't a soldier. This was a child. What happens when mercy clashes with command in the heart of an interstellar war? The red sun hung low over the New Denver colony, its crimson light stretching shadows across the ruined landscape like skeletal fingers. 3 Marines advanced through the wreckage, their boots crunching on shattered infrastructure and crystalline debris. Burned-out human transports lay twisted alongside the angular wreckage of Zephyrian skimmers, their alien alloys still smoking from plasma fire. This was Kepler 442b, a world caught in a double conflict. Humans fought the Zephyrian Empire for territorial control, while simultaneously battling a rebel faction that had established its own foothold. Every structure showed the scars of this complex warfare. Buildings bore the precise cuts of energy weapons alongside the brutal impact craters of conventional explosives. Crystal fragments littered the ground, catching the red sunlight and scattering it in prismatic patterns that danced across the rubble. The beauty of these refractions contrasted sharply with the pervasive stench of ozone from discharged weapons, and the deeper organic odor of decay that spoke of recent heavy casualties. Breathing filters could remove the particulates, but not the psychological weight of that smell. Private Taylor's sensor pad chimed softly, its display showing multiple contacts approaching from the northwest. Zephyrian flyers moving fast and low, their signature energy readings indicating active weapon systems. The team had maybe 10 minutes before aerial surveillance would cover their position. Their mission briefing had been straightforward: sweep the sector for any remaining hostile forces, document enemy technology, and clear the area for recovery operations. Standard post-engagement procedure. But battlefields rarely followed scripts, and Kepler 442b had already proven exceptionally unpredictable. As they moved past a collapsed communications tower, Corporal Lisa Chen held up a gloved hand. Her motion sensor registered movement 30 meters ahead, near a partially standing structure that might have been a residential block. The signature was small, inconsistent with adult Zephyrian combat forms. Too faint for powered armor, too irregular for mechanical systems. Sergeant Morrison signaled advance, weapon raised, but not aimed. Through his scope, he saw the source of the movement, a small shape curled against a fractured crystal support column. 4 limbs were visible, though the positioning suggested there might be more. The figure wasn't wearing the distinctive segmented armor of Zephyrian soldiers, nor did it carry any visible weaponry. This discovery contradicted all intelligence briefings about Zephyrian combat units. Their military doctrine valued uniformity and discipline above all, with no room for irregulars or unconventional combatants. Yet here was something that defied categorization, something that moved with the weak, pained motions of a wounded creature, rather than the calculated movements of a soldier. The approaching flyer's hum grew steadily louder, a reminder that the tactical window was closing. Every protocol demanded they treat this as a potential threat. Every training scenario prepared them for ambushes using unconventional lures. But the evidence before them suggested something outside established parameters, something that challenged fundamental assumptions about their enemy. The stage was set for a decision that would extend beyond immediate tactical considerations, one that might reveal new dimensions to this conflict or expose vulnerabilities in their understanding of the species they fought. Jake moved closer to the fragmented crystal structure, his rifle now hanging at his side. The small form pressed against the spire was clearly Zephyrian, blue-green skin with the distinctive bioluminescent markings that glowed faintly even in daylight. 4 slender arms were visible, 2 of them wrapped protectively around what might have been knees. No armor plating covered the thin torso, no weapon harness crossed the chest. The only evidence of violence was the steady drip of purple fluid soaking into the dust beneath the body. Corporal Chen maintained her position 10 meters back, sensor wand sweeping in precise arcs. Her display showed no energy signatures, no hidden threats in the immediate vicinity. The readings confirmed biological life signs only, weak, fluctuating, but present. Private Taylor faced outward, his attention divided between the horizon and his tactical display. The approaching flyers had reduced altitude, their sensor sweeps now actively painting the area. The child's breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps, Her eyes were partially open but unfocused, the pupils dilated with shock or pain. One of her lower arms bent at an unnatural angle, the limb clearly broken. Thin lines of bioluminescence along her sides pulsed with each labored breath, their light growing fainter with each cycle. She made no attempt to move or defend herself, completely exposed to the 3 armed humans standing over her. Standard engagement protocol flashed through Jake's mind. Leave no enemy combatants behind, but assume all Zephyrian life forms are hostile until proven otherwise. Intelligence briefings had shown what happened to human prisoners of the Empire: public executions, scientific experimentation, or slow torture for information. The Zephyrians offered no quarter, and doctrine demanded none be given in return. This was the foundation of their rules of engagement, tested across multiple battlefields. Yet the being before him violated all classification parameters. The size suggested a juvenile, the lack of armor indicated non-combatant status, and the injuries appeared consistent with collateral damage rather than combat wounds. This wasn't a soldier left behind. This was someone caught in the crossfire, abandoned when the fighting moved elsewhere. The drone of approaching aircraft grew steadily louder, the sound shifting from background hum to immediate threat. Chen glanced at her chrono, then at Jake. Flyers will be weapons hot in 90 seconds. We need to move or take cover. Her voice carried the flat tone of someone stating tactical reality, not making a recommendation. Taylor remained silent, his weapon trained outward, but his posture indicated he was waiting for the sergeant's decision. The triangle of their formation had tightened, the unspoken question hanging in the air between them. Chen shook her head slightly. Command clear on this. No non-essential contacts. We divert for this, we risk the mission and ourselves. She didn't look at the wounded form, keeping her professional distance from the emotional weight of the situation. The biosigns on Chen's scanner dipped again, the glowing lines along the child's sides fading to near invisibility. Jake watched the tiny chest rise and fall, the effort visible in every movement. He remembered a training instructor once saying that the first thing they strip from you in war is your humanity, and the last thing you surrender is your choice to keep it. He made his decision in the space between 2 heartbeats. Taylor, cover our 6. Chen, prep the medkit. We're not leaving her here. His voice carried no debate, only finality. The words hung in the air as he knelt beside the small form, his gloves already moving to assess the injuries. The flyer's engines screamed overhead, but his focus had narrowed to the single life before him. Jake slid his arms under the small form, bracing for weight that never came. The girl weighed less than his standard-issue rifle, her frame disturbingly light. Her bones felt hollow through the fabric of her simple garment, like a bird's skeletal structure adapted for flight rather than combat. The sensation unsettled him. This wasn't the dense, muscular build of Zephyrian warriors described in intelligence briefings. Purple blood immediately soaked through his combat gloves. The fluid cold and viscous against his skin, it had the consistency of engine coolant rather than human blood, with a faint metallic scent that cut through the ozone-tinged air. Each movement caused fresh bleeding from the wound on her side, the dark fluid spreading across his armor plating in irregular patterns. Chen signaled movement toward a drainage tunnel 50 meters east, her sensor indicating it was clear of immediate threats. They moved in practiced formation, Taylor covering their retreat while Jake carried the burden and Chen monitored approaching contacts. Sensor sweeps from the flyers above painted the ground around them in overlapping waves, the telltale prickling sensation of active targeting systems brushing against their armor's countermeasure systems. The tunnel entrance was a crumbling concrete archway half buried in debris. They slipped inside just as another sweep passed over their previous position. The darkness within provided cover but limited visibility, their helmet lamps cutting narrow beams through the dusty air. Chan established a comlink to command, her fingers moving across the wrist-mounted control panel. "Morrison," she said, her voice tight. "I need to report our status and request updated instructions." "Maintain comm silence," Jake ordered, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "No transmission until we have situational clarity." He watched the tunnel entrance, calculating how long before the flyers expanded their search pattern to include subsurface structures. The girl stirred in his arms, her 4 limbs twitching in unconscious patterns. A stream of whispered words emerged from her, the language composed of soft clicks and melodic tones that bore no resemblance to any human dialect. The sounds formed complex patterns that suggested meaning rather than random vocalization, though the universal translator in their helmets remained silent, unable to parse the unfamiliar syntax. Her broken arm moved involuntarily, the unnatural bend more apparent in the focused light of their lamps. The fracture appeared clean but severe, the limb hanging at an angle that spoke of significant trauma. The other 3 arms occasionally flexed, fingers opening and closing as if grasping for something just out of reach. Taylor kept watch at the tunnel entrance, his attention divided between the outside threat and their unusual cargo. His lamp beam caught a series of markings on the girl's simple chest plate, not the standard Zephyrian military identifiers, but what appeared to be hand-carved symbols. He moved closer, adjusting his light to illuminate the etching more clearly. 4 characters stood out against the dull metal surface, each mark showing the uneven strokes of non-mechanical tooling. The pattern suggested a name rather than an identification code. Lyra, Taylor read aloud, the human pronunciation feeling foreign yet fitting. The discovery shifted something in their perception. This wasn't just an alien child, but an individual with an identity. The shadow of a flyer passed directly over the tunnel entrance, the aircraft's engines vibrating through the concrete around them. For 3 heartbeats, complete darkness enveloped the space as the craft blocked all outside light. The sensation of being hunted intensified, the proximity of the search making their sanctuary feel increasingly temporary. Jake activated his comm, the channel open but encrypted. Command, this is Sierra Team. Require immediate evac at grid coordinate 7 Beta 9er. Possible high-value intelligence recovery. The lie came smoothly, each word chosen to trigger protocol without revealing their actual situation. He gave coordinates 2 kilometers from their actual position, buying time rather than immediate extraction. They moved deeper into the tunnel system, the burden in Jake's arms feeling heavier with each step despite its physical lightness. Each decision carried consequences that extended beyond their immediate survival, creating ripples that would eventually reach command structure. The weight wasn't in the girl's body, but in the defiance of orders, the calculated risk of mercy in a conflict that recognized none. Dr. Kate Williams stood frozen for a full 3 seconds when they brought the small form into her clinic. Her medical scanner dropped from suddenly numb fingers, clattering against the sterile floor. The 4-armed configuration defied all standard anatomical protocols, the blue-green skin tone suggesting entirely different hemoglobin chemistry. She recovered quickly, snapping on fresh gloves while barking orders to her assistants to clear the primary trauma bay. The purple blood presented the first critical problem. Standard human plasma transfusion protocols would cause immediate coagulation and toxic shock. Williams plugged a sample into the hematology analyzer, watching the screen flash warnings about incompatible iron-copper ratios and alien platelet analogs. She ordered the refrigeration unit opened, searching through experimental synthetic blood expanders that might buy them time without triggering immune responses. The fracture in the 3rd arm required complete immobilization, but no human splint could accommodate the unusual joint structure. Williams improvised with polymer molding compound, shaping a custom support around the slender limb while monitoring the strange bone density readings on her scanner. The other 3 arms twitched intermittently, their movement patterns suggesting complex neurological coordination unlike human bilateral symmetry. Bioluminescent markings along the patient's torso began glowing with increasing intensity as pain stimuli registered. The patterns shifted from soft blue to stark white, pulsing in rhythm with rising heart rate readings. Williams adjusted anesthetic delivery, noting how the alien metabolism processed sedatives at nearly double human rates. Each clinical decision became a calculated guess based on partial data. Jake remained beside the treatment table, his combat armor still smeared with purple residue. He found a heated blanket in a supply cabinet and draped it carefully over the small form, avoiding the injured limbs. The gesture seemed to calm the patient slightly, the bioluminescent pattern softening to a gentler blue hue. His presence created an odd contrast between battlefield readiness and medical vulnerability. Williams brought the portable ultrasound unit forward, its screen displaying vascular structures that branched in non-terrestrial patterns. The imaging revealed a circulatory system with secondary pump organs near each limb cluster, explaining how the patient had survived blood loss that would have killed a human. She mapped the unique anatomy, creating reference points for potential surgical intervention if required. The linguistics team arrived with their translation hardware, attaching sensors to the patient's cranial region. The device hummed for several minutes before producing its first broken phrases from the whispered alien speech. Pain, cold, sky falling. The words emerged flat and mechanical, yet carried undeniable meaning. Each utterance provided another data point for the struggling translation algorithms. When the patient spoke again, the translation device produced a clearer output. I am Lyra. The name hung in the sterile air, transforming the unknown alien into a specific individual with identity. The medical team exchanged glances, the implications settling over the room. This was no longer just biological specimen retrieval. They had established personhood. Jake leaned closer, speaking slowly toward the translation pickup. Safe. You are safe here. He repeated the words several times, watching the bioluminescent patterns shift in response. Later, he added friend and home, basic concepts that formed the foundation of communication. Each word seemed to register, the patient's breathing becoming more regular as understanding grew. The field clinic transformed around them. Medical equipment shared space with recording devices and scientific instruments. 2 armed guards took positions at the entrance, their weapons a stark reminder this was still a military installation. Yet within the curtained-off bay, a fragile sanctuary took shape, a space where cross-species communication began with 3 simple words and a heated blanket. Commander Hayes entered the medical bay like a storm front hitting calm waters. The door hissed shut behind him with a sound like a rifle bolt closing. His eyes swept the room, taking in the alien form on the treatment table, the medical equipment, the 3 humans standing guard over their unusual patient. His jaw tightened visibly beneath the close-cropped gray beard, the muscles along his neck standing out in sharp relief. Secure that specimen, Hayes ordered, his voice cutting through the medical bay's sterile atmosphere. 2 soldiers behind him moved forward, their weapons held at ready position. Full containment protocol. I want it in the quarantine wing within 10 minutes. He didn't look at the patient as he spoke, addressing the room as a whole rather than any individual. The order carried the weight of established procedure, the kind written in blood after previous encounters with Zephyrian forces. Dr. Williams stepped between the soldiers and her patient, her white coat making a stark contrast against their combat armor. This is a medical case, Commander, not a prisoner transfer. She's a child with critical injuries, not a tactical threat. Her scanner remained active, its display showing stable but fragile vital signs. My oath doesn't recognize species boundaries when someone needs care. Jake moved to stand beside Williams, his posture straight but not confrontational. We don't leave civilians to die, sir. Not even theirs. His gloves still bore the purple stains from carrying her, a visible reminder of the choice he'd already made. Protocol exists for combatants. This doesn't fit the parameters. Lyra watched the exchange from her bed, her 4 eyes tracking each speaker in turn. The bioluminescent patterns along her skin shifted from their calm blue to a faint amber hue, reflecting the tension in the room. Her breathing remained steady but shallow, the broken arm held immobile in its custom splint. She seemed to understand the conflict playing out around her despite the language barrier. Hayes's gaze swept over the small form on the bed, then back to his subordinates. Medical watch only, he conceded, the words coming out tight and measured. But armed guards remain at all times. Full biometric monitoring with remote shutdown capability on the translation equipment. The compromise felt brittle, a temporary suspension of standard procedure, rather than a change of policy. The argument continued in low tones outside the curtained area, Hayes's security concerns meeting Williams's medical ethics and Jake's battlefield experience. Words like precedent and security risk mixed with compassion and opportunity. The debate would echo through the base's command structure for days, officers choosing sides in the fundamental conflict between military necessity and moral imperative. Lyra's voice cut through the murmured arguments, the translation device converting her soft clicks and tones into halting English. I stay. Please. The 2 words hung in the air, simple and direct. Her eyes remained fixed on Hayes, the amber glow along her skin softening back to blue as she spoke. The directness of the request seemed to bypass the complex arguments about protocol and precedent. Hayes studied her for a long moment, his professional mask slipping just enough to show the calculation behind his eyes. He saw the broken limb, the medical equipment, the human soldiers who had clearly formed some bond with this alien life form, the military commander weighing risks against potential intelligence value, the human being recognizing something fundamentally vulnerable. He gave a single nod, the movement barely perceptible. Medical bay confinement only. Guards rotate every 4 hours. The orders came out clipped but final. He turned and left without another word, the soldiers following him out but taking up positions immediately outside the door. The line between enemy and ally, between prisoner and patient, had developed its first crack. That crack would widen in the coming days, creating space for understanding where only suspicion had existed before. The armed guards remained at their posts, but their presence now felt more like protection than imprisonment. Lyra's grasp of English progressed faster than any language model predicted. After 3 days, she formed complex sentences, her accent softening as she mimicked the tones and rhythms of human speech. She began asking questions about Earth, about families, about the nature of mercy, a concept her own language lacked a direct translation for. Her confidence grew with each conversation, the hesitation in her voice replaced by a quiet curiosity that filled the medical bay. She described Kithra with a sense of longing that transcended language. Cities carved from living crystal that caught the light of twin suns, streets that hummed with vibrational harmonies created by the wind passing through specially grown spires. Families communicated through complex songs that conveyed emotion and history in layered frequencies. The Empire had systematically dismantled this culture, replacing artistry with efficiency, community with conformity. What remained were hollow imitations of what her people once valued. The Zephyrian Empire's indoctrination began in childhood. Lyra explained how children were removed from their families at young ages, placed in training facilities where emotional displays earned punishment. Weakness was the ultimate shame, physical, emotional, or ideological. Those who showed compassion were isolated, retrained, or made examples of. She remembered a classmate who cried during combat simulations being publicly shamed and never seen again. The lesson was clear. Sentiment had no place in Imperial service. Other species were classified as threats by default. The Empire's teachings portrayed non-Zephyrian life as inherently chaotic, destructive, or inferior. Conquest was framed as a moral duty, bringing order to chaos through domination. Lyra had memorized the official classifications. Humans were aggressive primitives, other alliance. Species were genetic contaminants or technological parasites. These labels justified eradication or enslavement based on imperial convenience rather than actual threat. Assessment. Jake became her constant visitor between duties, bringing datapads with images of Earth animals, human cities, and historical events. His patience with her endless questions and his dry humor when explaining human idiosyncrasies created a safe space within the sterile medical bay. He never rushed her understanding, allowing concepts to settle at their own pace. His presence became an anchor point in her disorienting new reality, a symbol of consistency in a world that had turned incomprehensible. She began using his name without the title Sergeant, a subtle shift that indicated growing familiarity. The gesture carried weight in her culture. Names were reserved for trusted individuals while titles denoted function or rank. When she said Jake, it sounded both foreign and intimate, a bridge between their species built on 3 weeks of shared space and conversation. The guards noticed the change, their postures softening slightly at the boundaries of their watch. Her bioluminescence provided a visible indicator of her emotional state. During waking hours, the patterns shifted with her mood. Blue for calm, amber for curiosity, white for distress. At night, when sleep finally took her, the glow dimmed to a soft blue pulse that matched her slowed breathing. The medical staff learned to read these signals, adjusting their interactions based on the light patterns along her skin. The peaceful sleep glow became a reassuring sight during night shifts. She shared fragmented memories of her mother one evening, the translation device struggling with the emotional nuance. Her mother had been a crystal singer, someone who could shape growing structures through harmonic resonance. She remembered lying against her mother's side as she worked, feeling the vibrations travel through both their bodies. The memory emerged haltingly, as if retrieving something long buried under layers of imperial programming. The Empire had classified such abilities as non-essential, redirecting genetic potential toward combat applications. Everything she knew had been filtered through imperial dogma. History, science, even basic social interactions were taught through the lens of Zephyrian superiority. Questioning instructors earned punishment, curiosity was channeled into weapons research, and emotional connections were systematically discouraged. The person she had been becoming was a product of calculated design rather than natural development. The human medical bay, with its unexpected kindness and patient explanations, created the first cracks in that foundation. Lyra began comparing what she observed with what she had been taught. Humans showed weakness constantly, concern for injured comrades, grief for lost friends, patience with a confused alien child. Yet they functioned as an effective military force. Their technology, while different, demonstrated sophisticated understanding. The contradictions multiplied daily, each one chipping away at imperial certainty. She started asking why the Empire feared these qualities instead of studying them. Why control mattered more than understanding? The questions themselves marked a profound shift. For the first time, she wasn't seeking information to categorize or exploit. She was comparing worldviews, weighing values, examining the foundation of everything she had been taught to believe. The process was slow and often painful, like recalibrating depth perception after a lifetime of seeing the world flat. But with each passing day, the imperial framework felt less like absolute truth and more like one possible interpretation among many. Lyra described the Empire's propaganda with clinical detachment, as if reading from a manual she had memorized but never questioned. Humans were depicted as biologically flawed creatures driven by primitive emotions, their technological progress attributed to stolen alien knowledge rather than innovation. The official doctrine stated that allowing humanity to exist risked contaminating the galaxy with their chaotic influence. Extermination was framed as a sanitary measure, a necessary purification of the cosmic ecosystem. These teachings were reinforced through daily recitations and visual materials, showing manipulated footage of human atrocities. Children entered the military training system at age 6 standard cycles. Their education focused on physical conditioning, weapons proficiency, and ideological compliance. Emotional control was measured through biometric scans during combat simulations. Any spike in stress hormones or neural activity indicating fear resulted in immediate correction. The system rewarded aggression and punished hesitation, creating soldiers who could execute orders without ethical considerations. Personal attachments were systematically weakened through isolation and competition between trainees. Her own training included energy blade drills that left burn scars on practice drones, tactical simulations against digital human opponents programmed to exhibit what instructors called characteristic weakness patterns. She learned to identify and exploit hesitation, compassion, or other emotional responses in target profiles. The training emphasized that these traits represented vulnerabilities to be targeted rather than qualities to be understood. Scoring systems awarded bonus points for particularly brutal finishes against simulated enemies, showing fear or attempting surrender. The human base presented a different model of strength. Jake's patience during their language lessons demonstrated a form of endurance she hadn't encountered before. Dr. Williams's meticulous care of her injuries showed competence that didn't require domination. Guards who brought her extra food portions exhibited a generosity that contradicted the Empire's portrayal of humans as selfish creatures. These small acts accumulated, creating a counter-narrative to everything she had been taught. She confessed one evening that surviving the battlefield felt like a failure. Imperial training taught that death in combat brought honor, while being captured meant disgrace. The fact that humans had saved her instead of finishing her felt like a violation of natural order. This cognitive dissonance created persistent anxiety that sometimes disrupted her sleep patterns. The bioluminescent lines along her arms would flare white during these episodes, visible even through the thin medical blanket. Jake responded with stories from human history about prisoners who became ambassadors, enemies who became allies. He described cultures that valued redemption over punishment, that measured strength in the ability to forgive rather than destroy. These concepts felt alien at first, like learning a new mathematical system where the rules operated differently. She would often stop him to ask for clarification on terms like mercy or second chance, her head tilted in that characteristic way that indicated deep concentration. Her Questions began shifting from basic vocabulary to philosophical concepts. She asked why humans fought if they valued peace, how they balanced protection with aggression, where they drew the line between defense and conquest. These weren't intelligence-gathering questions anymore. They were the inquiries of someone trying to understand a completely different moral framework. The translation device sometimes struggled with the abstract nature of these conversations, requiring multiple rephrasing attempts. The medical bay transformed into an unlikely classroom. Technical manuals shared shelf space with children's books explaining human customs. Security monitors showed Lyra pointing at images of Earth landscapes, asking about climate variations and ecosystem management. Guards found themselves explaining family structures, holiday traditions, and historical conflicts to someone who approached these topics with no cultural context. The sterile room became a bridge between civilizations, one conversation at a time. One quiet afternoon, while watching the base's personnel go about their duties, Lyra spoke without looking at her translator. "This is my home now." The declaration emerged quietly but with complete certainty. The statement wasn't addressed to anyone in particular, yet it carried the weight of a formal oath. The bioluminescent patterns along her skin settled into a steady blue glow that didn't fluctuate with her breathing, indicating a profound state of calm resolution. The guards exchanged glances but said nothing, recognizing they had witnessed something significant. The dropship descended without warning, its angular shape casting a sharp shadow across the base's landing zone. 6 Kithra soldiers in full combat armor emerged first, their movements synchronized and efficient. Commander Vex followed, his armor bearing the crimson insignia of the Empire's Enforcement Division. The soldiers formed a perimeter around him, their energy rifles held at ready position. Base security responded immediately, human soldiers taking defensive positions while keeping weapons lowered but active. Vex's voice emerged, distorted through his helmet's vocalizer, the translation software converting his words into harsh mechanical English. "Surrender the traitor Lyra immediately." The demand cut through the tense silence, devoid of negotiation tone. His helmet's visual sensors scanned the assembled humans, noting defensive positions and weapon types. "Her weakness dishonors the Empire. Her contamination cannot spread." He took a step forward, his armored boots crunching on the gravel surface. "Comply or face retaliatory measures." The threat carried weight beyond the 6 soldiers present. Everyone understood Vex represented the entire Zephyrian war machine, not just a single squad. Base sensors would already be detecting increased activity in orbit, the implied threat of broader engagement hanging over the standoff. Lyra emerged from the medical bay entrance, her steps measured but firm. She wore simple human-made clothing that contrasted with her blue-green skin. The bioluminescent patterns along her arms and torso flared bright amber, then shifted to a defensive white glow. She stood at her full height, which still placed her significantly shorter than the armored Kithra soldiers. Her 4 hands remained at her sides, open and unarmed. "I am not weak." Her voice carried clearly without amplification, the English words accented but precise. "The Empire's strength is a cage. I choose my own path now." The declaration hung in the air, a direct challenge to everything Vex represented. Her bioluminescence pulsed with each word, the light patterns reinforcing her conviction visually. Jake moved between Lyra and the Kithra commander, his rifle coming up to low ready position. The weapon wasn't aimed directly at Vex but covered the approach vector. His posture remained professional, the stance of a soldier maintaining defensive positioning rather than initiating aggression. The human security team adjusted their formation slightly, creating overlapping fields of fire without escalating to active targeting. Vex's right arm moved in a blur of motion. An energy blade extended from his forearm housing, its edge humming with contained power. The sound cut through the air like a sharp intake of breath, the weapon's blue-white glow casting harsh shadows across the landing zone. The other Kithra soldiers mirrored the action, 6 energy blades activating simultaneously. The collective hum created a dissonant chord that set teeth on edge. Lyra's hands closed around the rifle of the nearest human guard. Her grip was uncertain at first, the weapon unfamiliar in her 4-handed hold. The guard yielded it without resistance, stepping back to draw his sidearm instead. She adjusted her grip, bringing the stock against her shoulder as she'd seen humans do during training exercises. The rifle trembled slightly but settled into aim. She centered the sights on Vex's chest plate, her voice steady despite the weapon's weight. "Leave them alone." The simple statement carried finality. Her bioluminescent pattern stabilized to a steady white glow, indicating complete focus. The Kithra soldiers hesitated, their training never having prepared them for this particular scenario. The standoff stretched into seconds that felt much longer. Human and Kithra weapons remained aimed but not firing, waiting for someone to break the equilibrium. Vex studied Lyra through his helmet, his energy blade still humming. She met his gaze without flinching, the human rifle looking both alien and natural in her hands. The moment became a test of which loyalty would hold, the Empire's indoctrination or her newfound convictions. Vex's energy blade cut through the air in a sudden, vicious arc. The movement was too fast for warning. A practice strike aimed directly at Lyra's center mass. The blade's hum intensified as it moved, its edge leaving a faint trail of ionized particles in its wake. There was no hesitation in the motion, no quarter offered, only the clean efficiency of a killing blow honed through countless repetitions in training simulations. Jake moved on instinct, his body intercepting the attack before his mind fully registered the decision. The energy blade connected with his shoulder armor, the material designed to deflect ballistic rounds but vulnerable to concentrated thermal damage. The blade sliced through the composite plating like it was parchment, continuing into the flesh and bone beneath. The smell of vaporized armor composite, mixed with the sharper scent of burned organic matter. Jake's body went rigid with shock, his rifle dropping from suddenly numb fingers. The energy weapon cauterized as it cut, preventing massive bleeding but ensuring maximum tissue damage. Neural feedback from his armor's medical system screamed warnings about severed tendons, fractured clavicle, and third-degree burns across the entire shoulder region. Jake collapsed to one knee, his breathing coming in sharp, controlled gasps as pain override protocol struggled to contain the trauma response. His vision narrowed to the immediate reality of the injury, the world shrinking to the searing heat in his shoulder. Lyra's rifle shot echoed across the landing zone a half-second later. The report was startlingly loud compared to the energy weapon's hum, a percussive blast of chemical propellant violence. The round struck Vex precisely where his helmet's armor joined the chest plate, a vulnerability point her training had emphasized. The projectile penetrated the seal, tearing through the biological structures beneath. Purple fluid sprayed from the entry point, arcing across the dusty ground in thick droplets. Vex staggered backward, his energy blade retracting automatically as neural signals failed. His hands went to his throat, the gesture instinctive but useless against the catastrophic damage. He collapsed to his knees, then forward onto the ground, his armored form hitting the surface with a final heavy thud. The remaining Kithra soldiers froze, their training having prepared them for tactical responses but not for this specific scenario. Their commander lay motionless, killed by one of their own species using human technology. Lyra maintained her firing stance, the rifle now sweeping across the other Kithra soldiers. Her four hands held the weapon with surprising stability, the initial trembling replaced by firm control. The bioluminescent patterns along her skin flared brilliant white, a visual representation of adrenaline surge and complete focus. She ignored the fallen Vex, her attention entirely on the remaining threat. "I am traitor to Empire." Her voice carried clear and steady, despite the aftermath of violence. "But I defend these humans now." The declaration left no room for interpretation. She stood between the Kithra soldiers and Jake's injured form, her posture making it clear she would fire again if necessary. The human rifle in her hands became both weapon and symbol, a physical representation of her changed allegiance. The Kithra soldiers slowly lowered their energy blades, the weapons retracting into their forearm housings. Their movements were hesitant, uncertain. Without Vex's commands, without clear directives for this unprecedented situation, their programming offered no guidance. They looked at Lyra, at the fallen human, at each other. The rigid discipline of Imperial training cracked under the weight of unexpected variables. Base medics rushed forward with a stretcher, their movements efficient despite the ongoing standoff. They assessed Jake's injury quickly, applying emergency coagulant and pain suppressants before moving him onto the transport. His vitals showed significant stress but stable core functions. The medics worked around Lyra, their presence creating a buffer between her and the confused Kithra soldiers. The stretcher moved swiftly toward the medical bay, its progress monitored by every person on the landing zone. Lyra's first act of violence became her most profound statement of loyalty. The shot that killed Vex secured the base's temporary safety, while establishing her position beyond any doubt. She had chosen a side using the Empire's methods, but for entirely different reasons. The weapon remained steady in her hands, covering the Kithra soldiers until human security teams moved to secure them. Her bioluminescence gradually shifted from combat white to alert amber as the immediate threat passed. Jake's recovery became a base-wide focus, the medical team utilizing experimental tissue regenerators and neural grafts to repair the energy blade damage. His promotion ceremony occurred in the medical bay, the new rank insignia placed carefully on a uniform draped over his undamaged shoulder. The citation mentioned courage under fire and exceptional interspecies diplomacy, formalizing what everyone already understood. He had changed the course of their engagement with the Zephyrian species. His story spread through military channels and civilian networks, the narrative evolving with each retelling. The Marine who saved an alien child became a symbol of humanity's potential for compassion, even in conflict. News services picked up the story, their reports carefully vetted by military censors but still carrying the essential truth. The incident demonstrated that not all victories came through superior firepower. Lyra transitioned from patient to active participant, her language skills making her indispensable. She worked with intelligence analysts decoding Zephyrian transmissions, her cultural knowledge providing context that automated translators missed. She recognized patterns in communication styles that indicated stress, deception, or hidden meanings. Her insights revealed tactical weaknesses in Empire formations and supply lines that had previously gone unnoticed. Other Kithra on the base began seeking her out during off hours, their conversations quiet and cautious at first. They spoke of doubts planted by the Empire's increasingly brutal tactics, questions about the endless conflict that had taken their families and futures. These whispered conversations occurred in maintenance corridors, empty storage rooms, and the relative privacy of the observation deck after dark. Each conversation reinforced the growing sense that the Imperial narrative was fracturing. They shared fragments of cultural memory that the Empire had tried to erase. Crystal cities that grew rather than being built, their structures shaped through harmonic resonance. Family units that valued artistic expression alongside practical skills. Educational systems that encouraged curiosity rather than compliance. These memories emerged like artifacts from another civilization, which in many ways they were. The Empire had systematically dismantled Kithra culture to create a more efficient military society. Lyra began teaching them human concepts that had no direct translation in their language. Mercy, forgiveness, redemption, these ideas required multiple explanations and examples to convey their full meaning. She used Jake's actions as primary examples, demonstrating how strength could include protection of the vulnerable. The lessons occurred informally, often during meal times or shared duties, the learning environment as important as the content itself. The alliance between human forces and dissident Kithra grew organically from these interactions. Shared survival created bonds that official diplomacy could never match. Kithra technicians helped human engineers understand captured technology, while human medics shared medical techniques that could help Kithra civilians. The cooperation remained unofficial at first, a quiet understanding between individuals rather than policy. Commander Hayes officially approved Lyra's position as cultural advisor after reviewing the strategic advantages her insights provided. The appointment came with security protocols and monitoring requirements, but also with access to intelligence resources and translation equipment. Her recommendations began influencing engagement rules and prisoner treatment policies, creating a feedback loop where compassion yielded better intelligence than interrogation. What began as one Marine's decision to save a wounded child had created political ramifications neither side could have predicted. The Empire's control relied on maintaining absolute ideological consistency among its subjects. Lyra's very existence as a living alternative to Imperial doctrine challenged that control at its foundation. Her actions demonstrated that loyalty could be earned through respect, rather than demanded through fear, a concept that spread through the Kithra ranks like a slow-acting virus. 6 months after the standoff with Vex, Lyra's routine decryption work uncovered a pattern in low-priority Empire communications. The data streams referenced Mining Station 7 with unusual frequency, their encryption just strong enough to suggest something worth hiding. She isolated the traffic, building a clearer picture from fragmented reports and supply manifests. The emerging reality was worse than any tactical assessment. The station housed dozens of Kithra, families in conditions the Empire classified as re-education through labor. Whole family units worked 16-hour shifts in crystalline quarries, their rations cut for minor infractions. Children as young as 5 standard cycles operated sorting machinery under armed supervision. The facility combined punitive labor with ideological indoctrination, breaking dissenters through exhaustion and isolation. Political prisoners shared the cavernous workspaces with ordinary Kithra civilians who had questioned imperial policies. The Empire made no distinction between organized resistance and casual doubt. Both received the same treatment. Security footage showed guards using energy prods on workers who moved too slowly, the punishments administered without warning or explanation. Mortality rates spiked during particularly brutal production quotas. One name appeared in a prisoner transfer manifest that made Lyra's hand still over the console. Nera, her cousin, taken during the same conscription wave that had claimed Lyra's family. The record showed Nera had resisted re-education protocols, earning extended confinement in high-gravity sectors. The record listed her as non-compliant but productive, a designation that typically preceded termination. She called Jake to the intelligence center, showing him the compiled data on multiple screens. Nutritional reports showed calorie allocations below survival minimums for Kithra physiology. Punishment logs detailed extended isolation and sensory deprivation for minor violations. Mortality statistics listed causes of death as workplace accidents or systemic failure, with concerning frequency. The evidence painted a systematic pattern of abuse disguised as productivity enhancement. Mining Station 7 orbited a gas giant deep within recognized Empire territory. Its location placed it behind multiple defensive perimeters and patrol routes. The station itself was fortress-class construction, with overlapping shield generators and weapon emplacements covering all approach vectors. Any rescue attempt would require penetrating layers of security, designed to repel full-scale assault. Detection would likely trigger immediate retaliation against the prisoners. The choice presented impossible dimensions. A rescue mission risked escalating the conflict into open war, with countless lives potentially lost in the broader engagement. Leaving the prisoners to their fate meant condoning systematic oppression and abandoning those who might otherwise join their growing resistance. Both options carried moral and strategic consequences that would ripple far beyond the immediate situation. General Hayes reviewed the intelligence in his command center, his expression grim. He authorized an unofficial recovery operation with strict deniability protocols. No military assets would appear in official deployment records. The team would use civilian-registered vessels with falsified documentation. Success meant liberated prisoners and new allies. Failure would be disavowed at the highest levels, with no assistance coming if things went wrong. Lyra's motivation needed no explanation. She would lead the infiltration team or go alone if refused. Her knowledge of station layout and Imperial procedures made her indispensable to any attempt. The personal connection to Nera added urgency, but didn't cloud her tactical assessment. She understood the risks better than anyone present, having experienced Imperial discipline firsthand. The operation required perfect timing and coordinated deception. They would need to mirror standard supply vessel behavior, while hiding their true capabilities. Digo security relied on predictable patterns and automated scanning. They would exploit both weaknesses. The insertion point allowed a 3-minute window during shift change, when sensor coverage relaxed slightly. Every movement would need to align with established routines to avoid triggering alerts. The margin for error measured in seconds rather than minutes. Captain Amy Rodriguez brought the horizon into the mining station's traffic pattern with practiced ease. Her civilian-registered repair ship showed all the proper identification codes and maintenance vessel transponder signals. The ship's exterior displayed subtle scuff marks and cosmetic damage that suggested years of hard use rather than military maintenance. Her crew moved with the slightly weary efficiency of contract workers rather than military precision. She opened a channel to station control, her voice carrying the mild frustration of someone dealing with recurring technical issues. Horizon to Mining Station 7. We're showing secondary coil instability in our port drive. Request emergency maintenance docking and technical assistance. The communication included standard civilian protocols and the appropriate fee transfer authorization for emergency services. Everything appeared normal on the surface. The station controller responded after a brief delay, his tone bored rather than suspicious. Acknowledged, Horizon. Proceed to Docking Bay Gamma 9. Maintenance teams will meet you there. The authorization came through with minimal additional questions. Empire security considered civilian vessels beneath serious scrutiny unless they displayed overt threats. The Horizon's disguise exploited that institutional arrogance perfectly. Jake and Lyra waited in the engineering bay surrounded by legitimate repair equipment. Both wore standard technician coveralls with hoods pulled low over their features. Their tools included modified versions of standard Kithra maintenance gear, allowing them to blend with station workers if necessary. Lyra's forearms posed a potential identification risk, but the bulky clothing and controlled movements helped conceal her distinctive physiology. As the docking clamp secured the Horizon, Lyra moved to a quiet corner near the airlock. She placed her hands against the ship's metal bulkhead and began producing a low-frequency harmonic through subtle vibrations. The crystal song was an ancient Kithra distress call, one the Empire had tried to erase from cultural memory. The vibrations traveled through the ship's structure into the station docking arm, carrying farther than sound alone would through atmosphere. Nara heard the vibrations through the soles of her work boots as she moved through a maintenance corridor. The signal was faint but unmistakable, a harmonic pattern from childhood that predated Imperial indoctrination. She responded by tapping a sequence against a coolant pipe, the metallic tones carrying their own message. The exchange established contact without any electronic transmission that might be monitored. The station's security systems were comprehensive, but predictable. Automated scans focused on weapon signatures and communication bursts rather than subtle physical vibrations. Guard patrols followed established routes with minimal variation, their routines hardened by years without meaningful security incidents. The Empire's confidence in its control created openings for those who understood the patterns. Human technology created unexpected advantages through incompatibility. The Horizon systems used different frequency bands and encryption protocols than standard Imperial equipment. This mismatch created sensor blind spots where neither system could properly interpret the other's emissions. Rodriguez's team used these gaps to move equipment and personnel with reduced detection risk. Explosives were placed near primary communication arrays in carefully calculated positions. The charges were small but strategically placed to maximize disruption while minimizing collateral damage. Each device was timed to detonate simultaneously during the shift change, when station personnel would be most distracted and response times would be longest. The explosions would create confusion rather than destruction, serving as diversion rather than weapon. The station's operation followed rigid schedules that never varied. The midnight shift change involved hundreds of workers moving through designated corridors, while security teams conducted turnover briefings. This 3-minute window offered the best opportunity for movement, without attracting attention. Every aspect of their planning revolved around this predictable lapse in security focus. The Horizon's crew synchronized their chronometers with station time, counting down to the moment when chaos would provide their cover. Nara's hands moved in the dim corridor, tracing patterns on the cool metal wall that conveyed complex information without words. She revealed a network of over 30 sympathetic workers spread across 7 sectors, their loyalty secured through shared resentment of Imperial control. These individuals occupied key positions in environmental control, power regulation, and maintenance access. Their coordination had been building for months, waiting for an opportunity that might never come. Communication occurred through crystal harmonics, a method Imperial sensors couldn't detect. Workers would hum specific frequencies against pipes or structural members, the vibrations carrying coded messages through the station's framework. The system used ancient Kithra musical patterns that predated Imperial language standardization. Security sweeps focused on electronic transmissions, completely missing the physical vibration networks operating beneath their attention. 43 family units stood ready to evacuate, their meager possessions packed into small bags days earlier. They carried only essentials, nutrition concentrates, medical supplies, and personal items small enough to conceal within work uniforms. Each family had developed cover stories about transferring to other stations, their preparations masked as compliance with Imperial reassignment procedures. The limited supplies reflected both practicality and the reality of their impoverished conditions. Children presented the greatest risk of detection during movement. Medical personnel within the network provided mild sedatives to keep younger children calm and quiet during the escape. Dosages were carefully measured to induce drowsiness without compromising mobility. Older children received strict instructions about silence and compliance. Their training reinforced through whispered warnings about what capture would mean for their families. Lyra coordinated with Jake through a combination of hand signals and whispered translations. Their communication needed to bridge species and tactical backgrounds without technical assistance. Jake's human gestures for clear, wait, and danger were adapted to accommodate Lyra's four-handed responses. The translation device was used sparingly for complex information. Its activation kept brief to minimize detection risk. This hybrid language evolved through necessity during their preparation. The escape route required moving all refugees to Shuttle Pod Bay Gamma 7 within the 20-minute window of shift change. The path wound through maintenance tunnels and storage areas normally empty during this period. Each family group would follow specific timing to avoid creating detectable patterns of movement. The final approach involved crossing 3 monitored corridors where timing would be critical. Delays at any point would cascade through the entire schedule. Explosives planted near communication arrays would disable primary and backup systems simultaneously. The blasts were calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimal structural damage. Imperial protocol demanded immediate security response to any comms failure, drawing guards away from evacuation routes. The resulting chaos would provide approximately 10 minutes of reduced surveillance before emergency systems restored basic functionality. Imperial guards followed established patrol patterns, but their routes included random variations designed to prevent predictability. Some guards took shortcuts through little-used corridors while others conducted unscheduled inspections of storage areas. These deviations weren't truly random. They followed patterns based on guard assignment rotations and shift supervisor preferences. Nara had mapped these variations over 6 months of observation. Nara's knowledge of guard behavior patterns was comprehensive, but not perfect. She could predict likely routes with 80% accuracy, based on time codes and personnel assignments. The remaining 20% represented unacceptable risk when moving large groups of untrained civilians. Each decision point required rapid assessment of multiple variables with no margin for hesitation. A single wrong turn would place everyone in immediate danger. The consequences of failure extended beyond capture or death. Discovery would trigger Imperial crackdowns on other stations, endangering thousands of potential dissidents. Families would be separated, children conscripted into military training, resistors executed as examples. Success meant freedom for 43 families. Failure would reinforce Imperial control across the entire sector. Every step carried the weight of countless lives beyond their immediate group. The first family slipped from their designated work sector into the maintenance corridor, their movements precise and utterly silent. They moved with the practiced quiet of people who had learned the cost of drawing attention, their soft-soled work boots making no sound against the metal flooring. The parents shielded 2 children between them, the younger one drowsy from sedatives but still able to walk with guidance. Their eyes showed the strain of constant vigilance, their bodies tense with the fear of discovery. Lyra waded 20 meters into the passage, her bioluminescence dialed to its lowest setting. The soft blue glow provided just enough illumination to see the path forward without creating detectable light signatures. She guided them with hand signals, her forearms moving in the specific patterns they had practiced during briefings. The family responded with nods, their trust in her evident despite the overwhelming risk. Each person moved past her toward the next checkpoint, their progress measured in careful, silent steps. Jake monitored their advance from a junction 50 meters ahead. His position provided sight lines along 3 different corridors, allowing him to watch for patrols while directing movement. He signaled the family forward with a single hand motion, his attention divided between their progress and his tactical display. The route avoided all active surveillance cameras, utilizing maintenance access points and structural gaps in the station's coverage. Each turn had been mapped during the planning phase, each potential hiding spot identified. The station shuddered with a deep, resonant vibration as the explosives detonated near the communication arrays. The sound was more felt than heard, a pressure wave that traveled through the deck plates and structural members. Emergency lighting flickered on as primary systems failed, casting harsh red shadows through the corridors. The constant hum of active comms channels ceased abruptly, replaced by the blare of collision alarms. The sudden silence where there should have been chatter felt more alarming than the explosions themselves. Imperial guards reacted with confusion rather than disciplined response. Their command network depended on continuous updates and coordinated instructions. Without those feeds, they became isolated units acting on fragmentary information. Some moved toward the explosion sites while others checked local sectors for additional threats. Their movements lost the coordinated efficiency of Imperial training, becoming individual reactions rather than part of a unified response. This fragmentation created temporary gaps in their coverage pattern. In the shuttle bay, the Horizon's crew activated the emergency pod launch sequence. The shuttle engines whined to life, their power-up sequence faster than standard Imperial models. Maintenance crews pretending to work on the pods moved with sudden purpose, overriding safety protocols that would normally require command authorization. The bay doors remained closed for now, but the pods were hot and ready for immediate departure. Their system showed green across the board, a minor miracle given the complexity of the operation. Nara guided the final group through a service tunnel, her voice maintaining a calm, low tone despite the urgency. She counted heads continuously, ensuring no one fell behind or became separated. Her knowledge of the station's layout allowed her to choose routes that avoided the growing confusion among the guards. She moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years learning every centimeter of this environment, every blind spot and access panel. The group followed her without question, their trust earned through months of careful planning. The stream of refugees grew steadily, becoming a continuous flow of desperate movement. 50 people now moved through the carefully orchestrated route, their collective hope outweighing their individual fear. Parents carried sleeping children. Older siblings helped grandparents, and everyone moved with the shared understanding that hesitation meant death. The group exhibited the quiet efficiency of people who had been waiting for this chance, their preparation now paying off in coordinated motion. The docking bay doors hissed open to admit 6 Imperial reinforcements in full combat armor. They entered in standard tactical formation, their energy rifles scanning the area for threats. Their arrival was faster than anticipated, suggesting someone had bypassed the communication breakdown with a localized alert. The soldiers took positions covering the shuttle pods, their weapon lights cutting bright cones through the bay's dim emergency lighting. Their posture indicated they were prepared to use lethal force. The lead soldier raised his rifle toward the approaching refugees, the weapon's safety clicking off with an audible snap. The sound echoed in the suddenly quiet bay, a definitive end to the illusion of stealth. Other soldiers mirrored the action, their weapons centering on the unarmed civilians. The refugees froze mid-step, their forward momentum halted by the immediate threat. The distance between freedom and capture narrowed to the space between trigger fingers and firing mechanisms. Captain Rodriguez's crew moved with sudden purpose among the Imperial soldiers, their actions appearing helpful while actually creating confusion. They pointed toward non-existent threats in empty corridors, reported false sensor readings to distracted guards, and accidentally triggered minor alarm panels that drew attention away from the refugees. Their performance was convincing enough to split the Imperial response, creating precious seconds of diverted focus. The deception relied on the soldiers' assumption that humans would naturally assist Imperial authority. Jake positioned himself between the raised rifles and the group of children at the front of the refugee column. His own weapon remained aimed at the lead soldier, but his body formed a physical barrier protecting the youngest evacuees. The children pressed against his legs, their faces showing confusion rather than fear, the sedatives blurring their understanding of the danger. His shoulder where Vex's blade had struck throbbed with remembered pain, but his stance remained steady. The Imperial rifles could easily penetrate his body and hit those behind him, but the symbolic protection mattered. Lyra stepped forward, her hands raised, empty and open. She spoke in rapid Kithra, her voice carrying the formal inflection patterns of Imperial military address. The words came quickly but clearly, designed to bypass the soldiers' training and reach whatever remained of their individual conscience. She described the conditions inside Mining Station 7's labor sectors, the inadequate nutrition, the punishment details, The family separated for minor infractions. Her account included specific details only someone who had experienced imperial discipline would know. She spoke of children taken from parents and trained to forget their cultural heritage, of workers collapsing from exhaustion, only to be labeled inefficient and reassigned to more brutal duties. Her description of the broken family structures echoed through the docking bay, each fact landing with the weight of first-hand experience. The soldiers had undoubtedly seen similar things themselves, had followed orders that sometimes troubled their sleep. Her words gave voice to those unspoken doubts. Some of the rifle barrels wavered slightly, dipping a few degrees from their aimed positions. The soldiers' postures showed the tension of conflicting training: obey orders without question versus protect imperial citizens. Their helmets hid their expressions, but the hesitation in their movements was visible. One soldier glanced toward the refugee children, his weapon lowering another few centimeters. The Imperial commander noticed the shift and barked a sharp order to maintain discipline. Nara reached a maintenance terminal near the bay's environmental controls. Her fingers moved across the interface with desperate speed, bypassing safety locks that should have required command authorization. The bay doors began cycling open, the massive panels sliding apart to reveal the star-filled blackness beyond. Warning alarms blared as atmosphere started venting into space, the decompression warning lights flashing crimson across the entire bay. The sudden pressure drop made everyone stagger slightly. The threat of explosive decompression forced immediate reaction. Everyone grabbed for handholds as wind whipped through the bay, pulling loose equipment toward the void. The Imperial soldiers hesitated, their training conflicting with survival instinct. Protocol demanded they secure the bay, but physics demanded they protect themselves from being blown into space. The refugee families crouched low, parents wrapping around children to form human anchors against the pulling force. Lyra's voice cut through the screaming wind, the translation device amplifying her words. "We leave or we all die here. Your choice." The statement carried no negotiation, only stark reality. Her bioluminescence flared white with the intensity of her conviction, making her stand out against the red emergency lighting. She held onto a structural support with two hands while keeping her eyes locked on the Imperial commander. The standoff had become a test of whose nerve would break first. The Imperial commander looked from his hesitating soldiers to the open bay doors, then to the determined faces of the refugees. His weapon remained raised but no longer aimed directly at anyone. The calculations behind his visor were invisible but undoubtedly complex. Military protocol versus certain death for everyone in the bay. He gave a sharp hand signal to his team, followed by a terse command over their internal comms. The rifle barrels swung upward to safe position, though the soldiers remained tense and ready. The refugees moved quickly but orderly toward the waiting shuttle pods, parents helping children into acceleration couches, while Jake and Lyra provided cover. The Imperial soldiers watched but didn't interfere, their weapons now pointing at the deck. The lead pod's engines flared to life, its hatch sealing against the thinning atmosphere. One by one, the shuttles disengaged from their docking clamps and moved toward the open bay doors, sliding into the freedom of open space beyond. The last view of the Imperial soldiers showed them standing immobile as the final pod cleared the bay. News of the rescue operation spread through Imperial communications channels despite efforts to contain it. The story traveled on civilian freighters, diplomatic couriers, and intercepted broadcasts, each retelling adding details that became legend. Within weeks, every major settlement in Empire space knew about the human ship that had penetrated their defenses to liberate enslaved workers. The incident became a quiet rallying point for dissent that had previously remained unspoken. Kithra across the Empire began whispering Lyra's name in secured compartments and private gatherings. They called her the traitor of Titan's Fall, but the title carried admiration rather than condemnation. Her defiance of Imperial authority demonstrated that resistance was possible, that the war machine could be challenged from within. Her image circulated through hidden data streams, often accompanied by fragments of her testimony about human mercy. These whispers grew into conversations, then into organized dissent. Ancient cultural practices began resurfacing in hidden communities. Crystal songs that had been suppressed for generations were sung again in shielded chambers, their harmonic patterns carrying memories of a culture predating imperial domination. Artisans secretly crafted traditional jewelry, using methods the Empire had banned as inefficient. Parents taught children fragments of their heritage, risking severe punishment to keep their identity alive. These acts of cultural preservation became subtle forms of resistance. Dozens of Kithra families began seeking contact with human forces, using complex methods to avoid detection. They transmitted coordinates through manipulated sensor readings, sent messages encrypted in radiation patterns, and used merchant vessels as intermediaries. Their trust was not easily given. The Empire had taught them to view humans as monsters, but Lyra's actions had shattered that conditioning. Each new contact provided intelligence about Imperial weaknesses and civilian discontent. Lyra's role evolved from translator to symbol. Her image appeared on resistance propaganda throughout contested systems, often shown standing between human soldiers and Kithra civilians. She became the acceptable face of collaboration, proof that cooperation didn't mean conquest. Human forces used her story in psychological operations, demonstrating their willingness to protect rather than destroy. Her unique position as both insider and outsider gave her credibility with both species. Jake's shoulder injury healed completely through advanced regeneration therapy, leaving only a faint scar as evidence of Vex's attack. His legend grew independently of his actual duties, with soldiers sharing exaggerated accounts of his actions during the mining station operation. The reality was impressive enough. His decision to save Lyra had created a cascade effect that was reshaping the conflict. He received command of special operations focused on humanitarian missions, rather than direct combat. The alliance between human forces and Kithra resistors formalized through a series of negotiated agreements. Technology exchanges allowed human engineers to understand Imperial systems better, while Kithra scientists gained access to human medical advancements. Intelligence sharing revealed Imperial fleet movements and supply line vulnerabilities. The cooperation remained unofficial in Imperial space, but operated with increasing effectiveness in border regions. Each successful collaboration built trust for more ambitious operations. Mining Station 7's successful rebellion inspired similar actions across other Imperial facilities. Workers on agricultural worlds organized slowdowns that reduced food supplies to military outposts. Technical crews on warships deliberately misaligned targeting systems during engagements. The resistance remained carefully coordinated to avoid detection, but the cumulative effect began straining Imperial logistics. The Empire responded with increased surveillance and punishment, which only fueled further dissent. Commander Hayes authorized additional covert operations using the same deniable protocols as the mining station mission. Each mission focused on extracting specific high-value individuals or liberating small groups from particularly brutal facilities. Success rates remained high due to improved intelligence from Kithra networks. The operations followed a consistent pattern: precision insertion, rapid extraction, and immediate withdrawal before Imperial forces could respond effectively. Mercy had become an unexpected weapon in the conflict. Every rescued family became advocates for cooperation, their first-hand accounts countering Imperial propaganda. Each act of protection demonstrated that humanity valued lives over territory. The strategy undermined Imperial control more effectively than direct military engagement, creating fractures in their foundational ideology. The Empire's greatest weakness turned out to be its inability to comprehend compassion as anything but a flaw to be exploited. Lyra stood on the horizon's observation deck, watching the star-streaked void slide past the reinforced viewport. The ship moved through contested space with practiced ease, her engines humming at precisely 70% capacity to maintain their civilian vessel disguise. Her four hands rested lightly on the console, the bioluminescent patterns along her skin shifting in calm blue waves. The star patterns told stories her people had once known, before the Empire rewrote their history. A coded transmission arrived through the ship's secondary receiver, its encryption matching Kithra resistance protocols. Lyra's fingers moved across the console, decoding the message with practiced efficiency. The text described another group of 47 families ready to defect from an agricultural processing station in Sector Theta 9. Their message included specific vulnerabilities in the station's security rotation and the location of hidden landing bays the Empire thought decommissioned. Each word carried the weight of desperate trust. Jake stepped onto the bridge, his movements quiet but familiar. He placed his hand on her upper shoulder, the gesture now natural between them. His fingers rested exactly where Vex's energy blade had struck months earlier, the healed tissue barely visible beneath his uniform. The contact communicated more than words could. Approval, solidarity, shared purpose. They had moved beyond needing translation devices for such moments. They reviewed the new intelligence together, their voices low amid the bridge's ambient hum. The agricultural station presented greater risks than Mining Station 7, with tighter security and heavier garrison forces. But the potential reward justified the danger. Nearly 200 civilians waiting for extraction, including children born into imperial servitude. Their planning session lasted 23 minutes, covering insertion points, diversion tactics, and fallback positions. Each contingency received equal consideration. The Empire's control had always relied on absolute monopoly of fear. Their citizens obeyed because alternatives seemed unimaginable, because resistance promised only pain and failure. That monopoly fractured when Lyra chose humanity over imperial doctrine. Now whispers of defiance traveled through secure channels, each successful rescue proving that fear could be overcome. The imperial response grew increasingly brutal but less effective, their violence only fueling further resistance. Humanity's most effective weapon turned out to be something imperial strategists never accounted for. Their compassion created alliances where force would have bred further hatred. Their willingness to risk everything for a single alien child demonstrated a strength the Empire couldn't comprehend. This approach yielded better intelligence, more reliable allies, and strategic advantages that no amount of firepower could secure. The lesson spread through human command structures, changing engagement protocols across multiple sectors. Lyra began singing softly, her voice generating harmonic frequencies that resonated through the ship's metal framework. The crystal song was an ancient Kithra hymn about dawn breaking over crystal fields, about prisoners walking free from stone cells. The melody contained mathematical patterns that conveyed hope and resilience through precise vibration intervals. Her forearms moved in subtle gestures that enhanced the harmonies, creating a multidimensional music that filled the bridge. The song predated the Empire by centuries, preserved through secret oral traditions after imperial censors banned it. Its lyrics spoke of freedom as both personal liberation and collective responsibility, of chains breaking through shared courage rather than individual strength. The melody had been sung in work camps and resistance cells, its notes carrying memories of a culture that refused to die completely. Every vibration felt like an act of rebellion. The war continued across dozens of star systems, its battles and campaigns following established patterns of conflict. But its fundamental meaning had shifted beneath the surface maneuvers. What began as a struggle for territory and resources had become a clash of ideologies, a contest between fear and compassion. Imperial forces still held strategic advantages, but their foundation grew increasingly unstable as more Kithra questioned their authority. That single act of mercy on a ruined battlefield had created exponential returns. The child saved that day had become a symbol, then a leader, then a movement. Her story inspired thousands to seek salvation through cooperation rather than conquest. Each rescued family became living proof that alternatives existed, that the Empire's way wasn't the only way. The Horizon continued its course, its navigation computer set for Sector Theta 9, its mission extending far beyond military objectives. One Marine's act of mercy reshaped an entire galactic conflict. The decision to save a wounded alien child created unexpected alliances and revealed humanity's most powerful weapon isn't technological superiority or tactical genius. It's the willingness to extend compassion across species lines, to recognize shared suffering beneath different physiologies. That single choice demonstrated strength through protection rather than domination, undermining imperial control more effectively than any fleet engagement. History is written through such moments, not in grand declarations but in quiet decisions that redefine what victory means. The war continues, but its moral center has irrevocably shifted toward an unexpected future.